Well, it's Mailbag Monday, and you asked the following questions. Does Kevin Kiermaier fill our need in left field? How about a trade for Burnes and Yelich from the Brewers? And do we really think that Aaron Judge isn't an option for Anaheim? All that and more. It's time to get locked on with Mike and John, and this is Locked On Angels.
You are Locked On Angels, your daily Los Angeles Angels podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And John and I thank you for making Locked On Angels your first listen today. Every show is free and available on all platforms like Apple Podcast and Spotify. And the best way to help us out is by giving us a rate and a review. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can help the show out with a like, a comment, a subscription, and you can click the bell to be notified every time a new episode drops.
Happy Monday to you, and thank you for being here for this edition of Locked On Angels, where it's your team every single day. You've got the Frisch Brothers here with you, a.k.a. the Super Halo Bros. My name is John, and that's my brother Mike.
And my name is Mike, and that's my brother John.
Man, Mike, I think we had the most questions submitted for Mailbag Monday that we've ever had. And so
Awesome.
What we've done is we've tried to compile them into groups of questions, and it turns out everybody wants to know who is going to be in left field for the Angels this season.
Right.
It's a big question.
Right.
So why don't we jump right in? We have two questions. One's from Dustin in Fullerton, and the other is from Rio Scuts _ on Instagram. They're both asking about Kevin Kiermaier. Is he somebody who makes sense for left field? Is that somebody that we would want to go for? Do we want to give Joe Adell the full-time gig? How does Moniak fit into this? Wondering how we feel about it since the Rays passed on Kiermaier, and perhaps splitting time with Joe Adell is not a bad idea. What do you think about Kevin Kiermaier, Mike?
I think the option is a cheap option, and I think that might be something that the Angels are going to prioritize this offseason. But I do think that there's better options in left field that are out there right now. I think Kevin Kiermaier is like option 4, option 5, if you can't get some of the bigger names, and we'll talk about them in just a few minutes. I do like the guy. I think he would be a great balance for a Joe Adell and a Mickey Moniak in left field. But again, I think that he is probably option 4 or option 5 in my playbook. What about yours?
For me, I would rather see Moniak and Joe Adell split time in left field than to bring in Kiermaier. And that is if the Angels can't get somebody to play left field. So that's my opinion there. I just think that I would rather see our young guys get the chance if we're not going to get a solid left fielder or even an experienced left fielder. And there's some suggestions in our questions here later on. But yeah, for me, I like Kevin Kiermaier too. I would rather see the young guys get a chance if that's the route that the Angels were going to take.
Yeah. Hey, our buddy Ruben Rosas on Instagram offered a trade proposal. All right.
Okay.
So let me hear your thoughts on this. The Brewers get Joe Adell, Louis Rengifo, Kai Busch, and Edgar Caro from the minor leagues. And we get Burnes and Yelich, and we would probably have to eat up some or all of his contract. Now, Ruben says, who says no? Johnny, do you say no?
Man, I would definitely take Corbin Burnes in a heartbeat, and I'd even be willing to give away some of the players that Ruben made in his trade proposal. I don't think I would want to take on Christian Yelich. I understand, he's a MVP. He won it in 2018, and the guy was a beast for the Brewers for a long time. And now he's a little more middle of the road. He's kind of had his worst defensive season. I mean, he's had other bad defensive seasons. This year it was -4 outs above average and -4 runs above average. So because of his playing in left field, 4 runs were scored, essentially, is how you can put that in layman's terms. So and he signed through 2029, I believe.
Ooh.
So it's just it's a long time. He's already 30. I think he'll be 31 when the season begins. So he would be around till about 36, 37. So I just don't think the Angels want to get saddled with another contract like that, especially after the Justin Upton sort of fiasco, because when we first got Upton, very excited. It was somebody that we needed. We needed a left fielder. And then that contract just went a little too long, and we paid the price for that. So I'm all about going for Corbin Burnes. I even think with Edgar Caro, who was an MVP in Single A, I would even give up Edgar Caro for Corbin Burnes. I would love to see Corbin. I know it would take more than just Caro, but if there's a package involving Edgar Caro, man, everybody's talking about him and how, he could be a top 100 prospect coming into this season, actually. And the Angels need that. The Angels need those prospects. However, Corbin Burnes is the kind of guy you pull the trigger for. But how do you feel about this proposal?
I think I would take Yelich out, and I would also probably drop Adele or Rengifo, one of the two, and offer Adele Bush or Caro or Rengifo Bush or Edgar Caro for Burnes. But I don't think I would want Yelich just because of that contract. I mean, there's not too many guys that are named Torrey Hunter that can play until they're 95 years old and look great in the outfield, right? And so I think that Yelich, because he's already on the wrong side of 30 and he already has some stats that are negative defensively, I think that you're taking on a lot, especially if you're going to take on that contract. Love the idea because Burnes is a guy who I think that we could get. His name's come up a few times with our listeners. And so I wonder if there might be some rumblings with a trade there. But I think I'd give up some of those young guys to get Burnes as a pitcher because I think he'd slot in nicely in that starting rotation.
I think the Angels would be willing to take on Yelich if it didn't cost them a Kai Bush or an Edgar Caro. So if it was something more along the lines of Adele and Rengifo and one of Kai Bush or Caro to get Burnes and then take on Yelich, I think that's kind of something they would do. But the Brewers are contenders, man. And I just don't see them giving up on Corbin Burnes, no matter the haul that they would get back, because they weren't that far off this season. They were right there. Hey, Mike, Connor Vogel, 750 on Instagram says, how about Michael Brantley for left field? Veteran, good lefty bat, and cheaper than a lot of guys out there. He's somebody I brought up before. I like the idea of Michael Brantley sharing time in left field with perhaps Moniak and Joe Adele. And I looked up this stat, Mike. He's averaged a 90% contact rate through his entire career, and he makes contact inside the zone, outside the zone. And we all know that the Angels struggled with that this season.
Yeah, if he can stay healthy, I think he's a really good option for us in left field. And I could see him leading off. I mean, I could see him being somebody that sets the table for the Angels as well. And if he's not leading off, then I probably would have him in the bottom part of the order just because he makes contact. And the bottom part of the order, their OPS, as we all know, was terrible, awful last season.
And the fact that he would be splitting time with somebody like a Moniak or a Joe Adele, I think that plays into the health question. It plays into, can he stay on the field? And I think that he certainly could. I think that would be a great option. How about Anthony Aguilu's message that's on Instagram? He said, bring back Cole Calhoun. I know he's not the best, but I loved him as an Angel. Man, I loved Cole Calhoun. And when you talk about hustle, he had it all. And my only thing is, we got Cole Calhoun's best years.
Yes, we did.
Those best years are behind him. And man, he certainly gave it his all with the Angels. How do you feel about Cole Calhoun?
Let's sign him, but not play him, just so that we don't have to play against him, because
he
seems to just own
us
Angel
when killer.
We play. Oh my gosh, everybody that
the
leaves
new
goes
Napoli
and just crushes us. Yes, right. Here's the next question, Johnny. How about Benintendi and Alberto? It's not Alberto.
Adalberto Mondesi.
Thank you.
Yes.
I'm struggling. As an outfield and shortstop in free agency. That's from Armani C23. What do you think about those two guys coming over to the Angels? Benintendi and Mondesi, outfield and shortstop for the Halos.
We've talked about Benintendi a few times on the show, and one of the concerns we have is his move from Kansas City to New York City with the Yankees and how his stats kind of fell off a little bit. But Mike, I'd still take him. I'd still put him in left field. I honestly think that Angel Stadium plays a little bit more like, KC and Kauffman Stadium more than it plays like Yankee Stadium. So I think that Benintendi could have success in Anaheim. As far as Adalberto Mondesi,
very good.
His best years are behind him, and he really only had 2 great years. His playing time has been cut with the Royals. And honestly, I think that you even get better defense with Andrew Velasquez and possibly a better bat if Velasquez just bats from the right side, as we started to see before he got hurt this season.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think if we're going to have great defense out there, it feels like putting Velasquez back out there would be the wise decision because Mondesi isn't going to improve. I do love the name Benintendi, and I would love to see him again, at the top of the lineup. I mean, he makes contact. And if his stats from last year where he declined in New York are not indicative of what he's going to do next season, then I would sign him. I'm not sure how you can really project that or prophesy about that. But
Got to go to Fangraphs and get the Zips projections, right?
Right. You need some help there, right? Well, we got a good team. We got a good group of people in the front office, so they'd be able to figure that stuff out. But Johnny, how about this question? Thoughts on Aaron Judge possibly becoming a Halo? This is from It's Claudia Rose. And what do you think, Johnny? Do you think that Aaron Judge, you and I talked about how this is such an arty move if he goes and gets Judge and does nothing else. But what do you think about Judge and some other moves?
Look, if the next owner is willing to pay for it, then why the heck not? Get Aaron Judge, put him in the outfield. He's used to playing right field. Maybe he could move to left. Maybe Taylor Ward would be more likely to move to left, but certainly solves the outfield problem. And man, Ohtani, Judge, Trout, good grief, man. That is just insane to think about. But I like you said, it would need to be in addition to other players. And I just don't see the Angels making that splash right now. And Judge is going to want tons of money, a big contract.
Yeah.
And if new ownership were in place and had a penchant for paying money and being willing to spend, then I would say yes, because I could see that happening. But since it's still arty, I think the Angels have to be smart with their money, of course, this offseason. How do you feel about Judge?
Man, I'm just thinking, like, how amazing would it be to have him in that lineup? Like, does he lead off and then Trout and then Ohtani? Right? Like, I mean, that would be amazing. But I do think that we really need to make sure that we fill this team out, right? And if we're going to throw some big money at some big contracts like that, then I think we have to fill the major needs of like shortstop and left field and a starting pitcher. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But Perry Manassian said that those are the people that he's looking at right now.
Absolutely. Well, coming up on Locked On Angels, does a local legend from our hometown, Taijuan Walker, make sense for the Halos? We'll get to that in just a minute. But first, Mike, Locked On Angels is brought to you by BetOnline.
I think getting Taijuan Walker would be a great bet, and I think BetOnline would agree with me. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your sports betting info, stats, news, analysis. You can get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. From football to basketball to soccer to esports, we've got it all at BetOnline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, and you must because you're listening to us, you can also find some really great stuff at BetOnline.net as well. They're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix, and they give you great direction and great help if you're new to the betting game and you don't want to lose a ton of money. They're so helpful in giving you some great direction. So head to their website today or use your mobile device to learn a whole lot more. BetOnline, where the game starts.
We want to thank you for making Locked On Angels your first listen of the day. And for your second listen today, you should check out Locked On Sports Today. From the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today is available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts.
It is a Mailbag Monday, and as John mentioned in our first segment, you asked a ton of questions, and it just goes to show how intrigued and interested we are in this offseason, and I am with you because I would love to see the Angels make some really big splashes. And Swervo27 asked this question, John, will we sign, a corner outfielder?
Infielder.
An infielder, corner infielder.
Corner infielder. Man, I would love to see, we talked about it, and on my GM episode, I would really love to see Jose Abreu come and play first base and share some time with Walsh, simply because he is older. Jose Abreu is 36 years old, which is insane to me. How did that happen? It feels like he just entered the league yesterday. But Mike, he bats consistently around 300 almost every season. He's only been hurt once, and that was in 2018, where he spent some time on the IL. The guy is just a picture of consistency, and he's a threat every time he's at the plate. He's intimidating. I mean, he can drive in runs, and he would be a great option to platoon with Walsh because Walsh is a lefty and Abreu is a righty. So I would really enjoy seeing Abreu at first base sharing time with Walsh. But what do you think about a corner infielder?
Well, let me jump down to Brandon Harris 17's question. He said, should
Mm-hmm.
we stick with Rendon or go after Justin Turner?
Hmm.
I think if we went after Justin Turner, I think he could be a great platoon for Jared Walsh at first base because
Interesting.
Justin Turner can play the entire infield. And talk about consistency. This guy has been so consistent and he's familiar with Southern California. And so I love the Jose Abreu signing and having him platoon over at first base. And perhaps, John, if you get Abreu or if you get Turner, maybe there's some spring training conversation and some spring training, and Walshy actually finds himself in left field. Now, I know he's a great first baseman, and I might be talking ridiculous here, but maybe that's an option for how they solve the left field issue and having Jared Walsh out there. And then they have a great first baseman that's going to be able to platoon with Walsh if he needs to play first, or you could have Walshy play left field. What do you think? Am I talking ridiculous here? Moving Walsh to left field? Would that be weird? Would that be dumb?
Not if he's sharing time at first base. This is that's the kind of guy who you want to see move around the field a little bit more. I mean, that's your Chris Taylors of the Dodgers, right?
Yeah.
Like you see him in the infield, in the outfield. That's why I want to see somebody like Brandon Drury get signed, because he can play all over the infield. So
not just stuck. Yeah.
They're not just stuck. And that's how a lot of these playoff teams, they get creative with their guys and find multiple uses for what they're able to do. So I think Walsh spending time in left, perhaps still playing first base. And then on those days you have Moniak and Joe Adell in left field and give them their chances and their due. I don't think it's a bad idea, Mike. Speaking of ideas that I'm not thrilled with, James, the gym guy on Instagram, he said, would Didi Gregorius be enough of an upgrade at shortstop? Also, he said, who do the Super Halo Bros want in left field? Well, I'll answer that first question. In left field, I like Jock Peterson. I really like him a lot. It seems like Nimmo is going to be really expensive, and Brandon Nimmo is somebody that I wanted in my GM episode. But then his market value went way up. Everybody wants Nimmo. So I think Jock Peterson on a short-term deal, which he seems to enjoy those 1 year, 2 year deals since he's left the Dodgers. I think Jock still has a lot to offer. He gives you some pop. He can play left field. And he would be my pick. Didi Gregorius, and man, his best years are behind him. And there was a conversation in the middle of the season, perhaps trading for Didi, and that didn't happen. And then he lost his spot, Mike, with the Phillies. He lost it to the rookie, Bryson Stott. So I don't think Didi would be an upgrade. I think that he would be more frustrating, especially when you have Fletcher and Rengifo and Soto waiting in the wings and even Velasquez off the bench. I just think that the Angels have some much better options there.
Let me throw a left fielder at you.
Okay.
How about the guy from Seattle, Mitch Haniger? Because he's a free agent and he has struggled to stay healthy, but hasn't been ineffective offensively when he's been in there. I mean, we're just 2 years removed from hitting 39 home runs and knocking in 100 RBIs. Now, his average and his on-base percentage aren't spectacular, but his OPS is really strong. He's had 700 to 800 in OPS. So he's an intriguing guy for me. I'm with you on Didi, though. I don't think that Didi Gregorius would be a great fit for us. I would rather go with like a Soto and a David Fletcher at shortstop rather than having Didi there. I think that would be just kind of a waste of money, maybe.
I like Haniger a lot. I think that makes sense. Health is the concern there, but you know that you have Adell and Moniak waiting in the wings if that were an issue. How about Game Over 27 on Instagram? Do you see the Angels going hard after any specific position? I think all the ones that we're talking about, starting pitching, left field, and the infield. I really think that they're going to go hard at short. I think they're going to go hard at left field. And they even have inquired about some starting pitching. It sounds like they're talking with the Rays, according to John Morosi from MLB Network, about pitching. They've been linked to Corbin Burnes in rumors. So really, it's those three that everybody sees that we need. It sounds like they are inquiring about all three. So if they had to go hard after one, for me, it's probably left field. I want to see that. But shortstop is a big need too. It's just that some of the best shortstops who are out there are going to cost money. And
Right.
it's just hard to say that the Angels will go hard after one of those big free agents just because of the sale and the history that Artie has with not going after those guys. But who knows? We'll see what happens. I mean, with this sale, Artie could say it's not my problem after this year. So we'll see what happens there. Hey, Mike, how about Swerve 27 had another question. He said, will we see Ben Joyce in spring training, and when will he be MLB ready? If you remember, Ben Joyce got drafted this year, and he can throw 100 miles an hour. He's a big arm and probably a bullpen piece. Do you see him in spring training and maybe even this season, Mike?
Yeah, I think he's going to be there at spring training. I don't think that he'll be there during the regular season. And I think what's going to be an indication as to whether he is there or not is what the Angels do with the bullpen. If they just stand pat, remain the same, then I would say we'll probably see Ben Joyce and maybe even Sam Bachman up in the major leagues this season. Bachman's been more of a starter than a reliever, but I could see both of them maybe starting in the bullpen. And I think we might see Chris Rodriguez in the bullpen as well, filling some of those roles. But I think that Joyce is definitely going to be there in spring training. And Perry has actually shown to bring up these young guys really quick. We have Reed Detmers, and he was brought up a year after he was drafted. And then we also had Chase Silseth, who was the first person to be in the major leagues, drafted in 2021. And so I wouldn't be surprised to see Joyce. I think that what's going to be the indicator on if he's there or not will be what we do with the bullpen.
Let's go to one last question. Steve Hahn 7 on Instagram asked, what are your thoughts on the Angels reportedly being in the mix for Verlander, Justin Verlander? Is that a good fit? I hadn't heard this before, that the Angels were in on Verlander. What do you think about that, Mike?
Yeah, I think Justin Verlander is intriguing just simply because he's had a great regular season, and obviously is going to be maybe potentially be the Cy Young. And I think that he eats up innings. I mean, obviously he got hurt this last season, but he's just a guy that is consistent at the top of the rotation, and he's intriguing to me. I just don't know if his value is going to be something that the Angels would be able to match, and then having to try to like sign Ohtani long-term and then be able to fill the shortstop and the left field role. And so he opted out of his contract with the Astros, which means that he knows he can get a whole lot more money.
I know. That's
I just don't know. I just don't know if the Angels are going to dish that out. And you've mentioned that already. What do you think? Do you think he's going to be with us?
I don't think that he'll be with us. I mean, it's not bad for the Angels to inquire about it. At least it shows that they're interested in getting good pitching. But at the end of the day, I mean, at his age and the money that he is probably going to command, like you said, he opted out of his big contract with the Astros and possibly could come back to the Astros for more money.
Right.
But the Angels have not a lot of money to spend, and that's self-imposed, right? That's the annoying part. It's self-imposed. So we're saying that with that caveat that we know that they don't have a lot of money to spend because Artie won't spend it. However, I think if they are going to go big on one free agent, I think it can't be somebody like Verlander. I think it's got to be somebody at shortstop at the end of the day.
Well, I love all these questions, and they are really intriguing to hear what you're thinking about and what you're processing. I would love to hear from you, and which is why this segment's going to be fun, because we've got a bunch of voicemails from a bunch of different listeners. So, Johnny, let's hit the first voicemail.
Mike and John, y'all are legends. This is David. I live in Arizona, but I'm homegrown Yucaipa, California boy, and this is somewhat serious, but it's more just for the Yucaipa fans. Taijuan Walker could opt out of his deal with the Mets this year. Matt Davidson, Yucaipa graduate, free agent from the A's. We need some corner depth, potentially. Scale of 1 to 10, what's the likelihood we get Taijuan and Matt on the Angels for some Inland Empire boys repping on the Angels? Love you, dudes. Appreciate what you guys do. See you later.
David from Arizona, our buddy from our hometown, Yucaipa, California. David, we love you, buddy. Thank you for giving us a call. Man, do people out there know that Yucaipa is a baseball factory? Little Yucaipa, California, and the Inland Empire is a baseball factory, by extension, Redlands too. And you've got guys like Tyler Chatwood, who came from Redlands, of course, Matt Davidson and Taijuan Walker both came from Ukaipa. So Mike, David wants to know, how do we feel about the idea of Taijuan Walker and Matt Davidson being Halos next season?
I'm all in on Walker. I think that if he does opt out, man, we should go after him, because you and I have talked about this before.
Yeah.
Like, we should have gone after him before he signed with the Mets, because I think he's a great arm and he's still a young guy. And I think that he could really perform. Plus, he's going to be in front of a quasi hometown, right? Like, I mean, we're an hour away from Anaheim. And so it'd be great to see him. And so I think he slots in really well in this starting rotation. He's an innings eater, and he was successful in New York with the Mets, John.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is really good indicator for what he could do for us. When it comes to Matt Davidson, just some depth, I think it'd be great. I think that what Matt brings is a big bat. He hits for a lot of power, but that's about it. And I'm not really sure about his defense. And so I don't want him to fall into the role of who was the guy that looked like Syndergaard last year that came up from the minor leagues?
David McKinnon.
Yeah. And you know what? David was great, but I felt like David kind of was just pigeonholed as sort of this guy that can hit really well. But you're not really sure where you can put him, right? And I'm not sure about where Matt would actually play. He could be some depth piece for us, but we need somebody, and you mentioned it with Brandon Drury, we need somebody that can play all different positions around the infield and not just get stuck at third or not just get stuck at first base. We need somebody that can move around. What do you think about these two guys?
Man, I love Taijuan Walker. He sits at about a 3.5 ERA since he joined the Mets. And I think it was John Heyman, as much as he annoys us, and he does know New York. And it sounds like Taijuan would want something in the 4 to 5 year range, which I think it'd actually be great, because then you have that middle of the rotation locked up for a good long time. And really, you're right. He has succeeded with the Mets since he signed there, and I really wish we would have gone after him before he signed there. Davidson, I think you could bring in on a minor league deal to AAA and have him as a depth piece. His big bat, dude, when he came up and was hitting for Arizona and the White Sox, the guy could just mash,
right?
But the batting average just hasn't been there. But he would be a great AAA guy to come up when somebody's hurt, and if you need somebody to step in and play some defense, I think that he'd be a good choice. It would be a feel-good story for us to see him. We know the Angels love getting guys from the area. They have tons of Orange County guys in their minors and on the team as well. Hey, let's go to another voicemail here. This one comes from Bob from Yorba Linda.
Hey, gentlemen, this is Bob from Yorba Linda. I would trade for Jeff McNeil with the Mets. He's a local product. He's National League batting champion, and he could play left field, outfield, and infield, second base. And in that trade, I'd trade Fletcher, Stassi, and Adele, and maybe somebody out of Trash Panda's one of the pitchers there. Another thing I'd add, I'm disappointed in the hitting coach they selected. I would have added Chili Davis. He's old school. He's into hitting. He's not as much into the stats and launch angle, and that's what they need. Angels need people on base when some of the big hitters come to bat. Anyway, take care. Love your broadcasts. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob from Yorba Linda, for sending in your voicemail. I really like what he proposed, that trade for Jeff McNeil. He's somebody that I've been a fan of the last few years. He was on my fantasy team this season, so I appreciate him there as well. And
Nice.
Mike, it's another example of like that Chris Taylor type that can play anywhere and can help you out in the outfield or the infield. And what he proposed, Fletcher, Stassi, Adele, and maybe a Trash Pandas pitcher. I just don't see the Mets making that trade, just because, they won so many games this season, 100 games, and Jeff McNeil was a big part of that. And I still think that they're going to try to run it back, especially with McNeil on the team.
Yeah, the question that the Mets have to ask themselves is, can we win with Fletch and with Stassi and with Adele and with one of those pitchers? And they're going to want to win again right now.
Yeah.
And I think McNeil helps them to do that. I love the idea. And I appreciate that from the listeners, that they're getting creative. I also love Chili Davis. He's always been one of my favorite Angels. I mean, that guy was phenomenal, and he's been a great hitting coach. And I hear the disappointment in Marcus Thames, because Marcus Thames' resume is not impressive. But I do think that Marcus Thames is in a situation that is going to actually benefit him, and Perry Manassian and him are going to have some great communications. I mean, Joe Maddon's book talks a lot about the frustration between Perry Manassian and the hitting coach, and how Perry actually noticed Brandon Marsh's swing needed to be adjusted. Our buddies on Twitter, Beyond the Halo, actually gave us a tweet about that. And so I would love to see that actually take place with the Halos. I'd love to see them really work out a good system with Marcus Thames. But I'm with you. I love Chili Davis.
Well, Bob, let me just say too about Marcus Thames, his priority is swinging on pitches in the zone. And if you think about guys like Jared Walsh or Joe Adell, I think if that emphasis that Marcus Thames brings is on swinging in the zone and not outside the strike zone, I think that's going to really benefit guys like Walsh and Adell and help them make more contact. And even with all the strikeouts we had this season, even on, don't get me wrong, there were fastballs down the middle that guys were not hitting. But I think to ease your concern and your disappointment, Bob, I think that Marcus Thames brings a contact approach, especially on pitches in the zone. And I think that's going to be really beneficial to the Angels. Mike, let's go to one more voicemail right now.
Hey guys, this is James from Tampa, Florida. And I just have some questions about Phil Nevin. If the Angels make the playoffs next season, do you think they'll keep Phil Nevin and sign him to a multi-year deal? I know the Angels didn't do too well this season with him this last season, but I don't think a lot of that was his fault. All right, have a good one, guys.
James, all the way from Tampa, Florida, thank you for being a listener of Locked On Angels and for sending in your voicemail. Mike, what happens with Phil Nevin if the Angels are successful this season?
I think that they re-sign him, and I think it's probably a 2-year deal. And I think that that's Perry's decision. I don't think it's ownership's decision. I think Perry's going to get his guy. And the reason why we did a 1-year deal is because there is some ambiguity when it comes to ownership. And this is kind of a, what are we going to do with this season type of season? And to make another move and to hire a new guy, it just wouldn't make sense. So they needed some continuity. Phil's been that guy. And I think that now he has a clean slate. He gets to come into a fresh inning, so to speak, and be able to build this team from the ground up, go through spring training, offseason, all of that stuff. And if he ends up successful and we get to the playoffs, why not? Why not bring him back? Especially if Mike Trout loves him, especially if Shohei Ohtani loves him, then why not bring him back? I think he should get a shot. If he wins this season, he should get a shot for a few more seasons with the Halos. What do you think?
I think you hit the nail on the head with the note about if Mike Trout loves him, if Shohei Ohtani loves him, if the players like Phil Nevin and enjoy playing for him, and he brings kind of that grunginess to the table, that gruffness, it's kind of an edge that the Angels have needed out of a manager for a while. We haven't had that. Brad Ausmus was very quiet. Joe Maddon, kind of had an edge every now and then, but it seemed more of like it wasn't an aggressive edge. So Phil Nevin brings some muscle, figuratively and literally. And I think that he defends his guys, and I think he sticks up for his guys. But again, I think it comes back to, do the players enjoy playing for him? And we'll see how that goes this season. And if key guys like Trout and Ohtani do like him, then I imagine even when new ownership comes in, that he'll stick around. And if he doesn't, get Erstad.
Yes. Well, thanks for making Locked On Angels your first listen today. Now for your next listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast. They share some of the biggest stories of the day, instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. They're available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts.
We really appreciate you joining us for this edition of Locked On Angels. If you want to follow the show, you can get at us on Twitter at Locked On Angels, and you can reach Mike and I at Super Halo Bros on Twitter and Instagram. Thank you for those watching on YouTube for commenting below the video. Mike, what do we have on deck for tomorrow's show?
All right. Well, we're going to make the case, Johnny. We're going to make the case for a shortstop, and that shortstop is Xander Bogaerts, who has opted out of his contract.
Yes.
And you and I are going to make the case why this would actually be a really great signing for our Halos, and we're going to talk about that tomorrow on Locked On Angels.
All right, looking forward to that conversation. Maybe we will solve the shortstop problem for the Halos. We hope that you'll join us again. Until then, my name is John, and that's my brother Mike.
And my name is Mike, and that's my brother John.
That's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Angels, and we'll see you right back here tomorrow.